The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another Learning Lunch hosted by FormatApproved.com. My name is Brian Johnson. I'm the Senior Director of Online Training and Education with Format Approved, and I'll be your moderator today. Today's Learning Lunch will cover what's new in touchscreen and voice-driven technology for EHR. We're joined today by Barbara Mann of Speech Solutions Incorporated. Barbara is an expert in speech recognition technology for healthcare with more than 20 years of experience. On the touchscreen side of things, we'll be joined by Ed Khamou, owner of SSG Services, a Chicagoland MSP. We're honored to share the expertise of these presenters with you today. Before we begin, some housekeeping notes. Please note that you can ask questions of our presenters at any time during today's session by entering them into the chat area during the presentation. In the second half of our session, we will address as many questions as time allows. If we do run out of time, answers to all submitted questions will be posted to our website and sent via email link later in the week. Also, please note that all registered attendees of today's session will receive an email with links to both the recorded and PDF versions of the event. Well, Barbara, thank you for joining us today. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you.
Let's get down to the presentation. Let's begin. So why should clinicians and medical personnel consider using speech recognition technology?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. One of them is improved data entry speed, and there's a big reason for that. The reason is, in comparison to even 4 or 5 years ago, the computers have gotten much faster with the dual core processors and more, and amazing amounts of RAM that people are able to put into their computers these days. That gives speech recognition the power the engineers have been looking at for years. We knew 20 years ago that once we got a nice fast computer, the accuracy would be there, and it definitely is today. If you've tried speech recognition in the past, especially if it was 4 years ago or more, and you didn't like it very much, I think you'll find it's a lot different today. I've seen doctors get 100% recognition accuracy during training sessions, and when I talk to them later, 98 to 99% accuracy, and they are just astounded.
So that
the
is,
other thing is,
oh, go ahead. I was just going to say that is a big improvement over years previous.
Huge, huge.
Please continue.
And then if doctors are using transcription, it's really much less expensive than transcription. I had a call the other day from one of my clients who's hoping to add a doctor to his practice, and he's trying to convince him to use speech recognition because he has saved so much money from not using transcription over the past 5 years that he's worked with speech recognition. And we're finding that depending on what you're paying for transcription now, you can save anywhere from $5,000 to over $25,000 a year just using speech recognition. The big thing that has happened, and quite interestingly, because studies have been done, is accelerating EHR adoption. One of the biggest problems has been that as practices have moved over to EHRs, the doctors have been reluctant to use the EMR, much less type information into it. But because speech recognition is time-saving and money-saving, doctors who don't type are being encouraged to use speech recognition. They've been surprised to find out they get much more detail into their notes, and they also finish the notes much faster. This has resulted in their being much happier working with their EHR, and they don't have to learn to type, which is a very big deal for them. I don't know a single doctor who's ever gone to medical school to learn how to type, and they don't have to learn today. Speech recognition solves that problem. And then we're finding also the doctors are having better patient interaction. They're able to comfortably use speech recognition after a few weeks, and that can take anywhere from a day to a couple of weeks to get comfortable with it. And you may even find that you'll be dictating in front of your patient. If you're accustomed to doing this with a recorder, then it won't be any adjustment for you. But I was quite impressed when I had a recent exam, and the doctor excused herself by saying she just wanted to dictate some notes into my chart. She went over to her computer, picked up her mic, and then spent about 30 seconds dictating and updated my chart completely. Then she was back, and what she was able to do was pay complete attention to my particular situation and to me. What happens with doctors who are typing in laptops, and I've been with them as well, is they tend to bury themselves in the laptop so that they're asking you questions and looking at the keyboard because they don't know how to type very well. So they don't look at the patient. I had an ear exam a few years ago, and out of the 4 people that interacted with me in the practice, only one person looked me in the eye, and that was the one that took my photograph. The rest of the medical staff buried their heads in their computers, and except for looking in my ear, they never touched or looked at me. And needless to say, they never looked me in the eye. But it was very instructive when you find that speech recognition results in better patient interaction because you can actually look at the patient and dictate at the same time once you become skilled with using speech recognition.
That's interesting because that's one of the chief complaints we hear here at Format Approved about EHR technology and the way that it changes clinical patient or clinician-patient interaction. So I can see why that'd be a big draw for a lot of providers.
Oh, very definitely.
Now, you've touched on this a little bit, but let's talk in more detail about the improved accuracy of speech recognition software. So you're saying it's now accurate enough to be used in a clinical setting?
Oh, very definitely. The speech recognition manufacturers are claiming 99% plus accuracy. And I have seen 100% accuracy. It's just truly, truly amazing. A lot of that comes from training, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But again, it's that speed of that computer, the amount of processor speed, and the RAM that you have. The accuracy in the iPhone, smartphone arena versus speech recognition products that are chargeable, not free, is quite different. So if you're using something like Siri, you're going to find that you may or may not have high accuracy. That's because it's called what we call speaker independent. We also call that voice recognition as opposed to speech recognition. Voice recognition we define as being speaker independent. So that means if you have Siri on your iPhone, and I come and say, gee, I'd like to send a note to John Smith, I could take your Siri, dictate into it, and she would probably recognize me. However, if you have a speech recognition product that is medically, that is charged for, actually, versus free, this is requiring that the speech recognition product know how you speak, know how you pronounce words, and it is tuned to the way you talk. That means that I can't go up to your voice file, Brian. Number one, I'm female, you're male. That will impact it. And number two, we certainly don't talk the same. And so I'm not going to get very high accuracy if I take your voice file and try to talk into it. So if you are having any problems with smartphone recognition, don't fear, because the difference between the voice recognition on your smartphone and with speech recognition that would be on your laptop or your, well, generally everybody's using laptops these days, or on your desktop, is going to be significant. It's going to be near 100% as opposed to I don't know what people get with something like Siri. It can be as low as 50% or even lower.
Yeah, there's been a lot of kind of lampoons on the internet about Siri's little quirks. Now, I apologize if I'm skipping ahead here, but the training process is that you literally are just going through a series of exercises to train the machine, the software rather, to recognize the way that you speak. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, what it is, and that's just a second. What I would like to point out is the difference in the word training. And we've tried to change everybody to talk a little differently, and it hasn't worked. We've tried for 20 years, so I don't expect it's going to change much.
Sure.
There is training in the world of speech recognition. First, you have to train the speech recognition system to your voice. In the old days, that took forever. It was a huge step forward. We only had to work for 30 minutes to train the speech recognition engine, and now it takes only 4 minutes. So what these speech recognition systems do is have you talk for 4 minutes, and that's enough information for the speech engine to adapt to the way you talk and get any accent that you have, and just get your voice. They're building a model around your voice, and then it will learn. That's all you have to do as far as training Dragon. But then there is the product training, which trains you to understand the speech recognition software. Product training consists of teaching each end user the basics they'll have to know and the tips and tricks to keep that accuracy as high as possible, because you're going after accuracy. We know we save doctors hours of time by training them to use a speech recognition system, but it's only 2 hours of training, and then later on working with them for an hour or so in their EMR using the speech recognition system. And this saves doctors 24 hours trying to figure everything out on their own, because there's a lot that you don't have to know to be successful at speech recognition. You don't have to get a PhD in it to make it work for you. But you do need a coach to be able to tell you what's going to work and what you need to know. It's probably more important to know what you don't need to know than to know what you need to know, because people will overthink it, and you really don't need to do it. We're very, very proud that we get people up and running on speech recognition, whether they're computer novices or experts, and whether they're English speaking or non-native English speakers.
And so maybe you could say a little bit more about that. And I see on the slide that it says, it recognizes a wide variety of accents. So that's partly a matter of the software learning the individual's way of speaking, but then it's also the training aspect, the human training aspect that you were talking about. Is that part of it?
Yeah, the product, I call it product training to differentiate it from the training Dragon to understand you. And that is what we cover during training. One of the functions, the most important functions for every single speech recognition system out there, that is not that speaker independent that I was talking about with Siri and the smartphones, is that you have to teach Dragon if it gets it wrong. So you have to correct it and say, I said accent, not accenture, whatever word it gets wrong. So in the beginning, you have to kind of baby it along and say, hey, this is the way I speak, not the way you think I speak. And by correcting it, it will learn you, and that's how you adapt the speech recognition to your accent. Now, in the olden days, the products had a couple of accented language models. One was Indian, and the other one, interestingly enough, was British. Now, we've got the ability to have Pakistani, Australian, Far Eastern, and Spanish accents. And I have found that even with those accents, we can add other accents in there. I've trained people with Chinese accents, countries in Africa. I believe the person was Ghanaian, and then to Caribbean accents. One doctor was Trinidad, and I was really concerned about his accent, and I thought he was, when he called me back, I thought, oops, I think maybe we got a problem. But he just called me and asked me a question, and I asked him how it was going. He said, oh, it's just great. I just wanted to go over a couple of things. So I've been very, very fortunate in being able to get people with foreign accents so that they can use Dragon. And that's a huge part of the product training that I do with people with accents. And just to add one thing, I've had people say, oh, well, I hear it's really great, but I don't think I know it doesn't work with foreign accents. And that's what I'm trying to overcome, because it does if the person is properly trained.
Maybe you could also add a note. I see here that it's modified to recognize medical terminology. Is that vocabulary that's been loaded into the system? Could you address that?
Yes, that's exactly right. Excuse me. The medical vocabularies, excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water. I have a cold.
Yeah, I forgot to mention to our guest that our presenter has been good enough to join us, even though she's recovering from a cold, so we apologize for any coughing, but we're pleased she could join us anyway.
I'm sorry. Okay, we were talking about
medical terminology and how it's been loaded into the
the medical terminology. I'm sorry. I have some notes on this, but what basically happens with the medical terminology is that there are specialty vocabularies, and these are worked on by the manufacturers. They are historical vocabulary. So years and years and years ago, like 20, they started with, say, an orthopedic vocabulary. And then as they got more information, they fed that into orthopedic vocabulary to plump it up, to get all of the phrasing, all of the terminology, and all of the medicines that are used in that context. And they made statistical models out of this. Now, they did this for every single specialty that they could. And right now, there's one manufacturer that has actually got 90 different specialty vocabularies, which is incredible. Let me tell you the function of the vocabulary, and this sounds like a very, very simple statement or problem. But in gastroenterology, years ago, which would be 5 or 6, I guess, if the gastroenterologist dictated the patient had the following problems with his colon, it would come up with 2 punctuation marks. So that, for a gastroenterologist, isn't very useful.
Right.
So as they increase the accuracy with it, now if the doctor says the patient has the following problems with his colon, it comes out with the word colon and the punctuation colon. So if very little things like that, feedback from the medical community takes care of those, and that's how we're getting close to 100% accuracy there. The other thing that I find, I use a general vocabulary as well as the medical vocabularies, that if I'm in a medical vocabulary and I try to say, Dear John, I am going to the store to get whatever, just very generalized dictation, I'm going to get errors if I'm in a medical vocabulary because it's expecting orthopedic dictation in orthopedics, gastroenterology, and gastroenterology vocabularies, etc. So that's what that medical vocabulary will do for you. You can't really grab something off the shelf and teach it everything you need to know in, or the speech engine needs to know in your particular specialty, and that's what those medical vocabularies do for you.
So you've touched on this a little bit, but let's talk more about how speech integration now works with EHR solutions. Does it work with anything, or tell us more about how it plugs in?
Actually, it depends on the speech recognition engine and system that you purchase, but
Mm-hmm.
a true medical speech recognition product should integrate with all EHRs. The level of integration is more dependent on the EHR, the way it's programmed, the platform they use, whether it's Citrix or whether it's local, for example, and the speech recognition program. We tend to believe here that we can make anything work, and so far we've been able to do this, but don't hold me to it, but we should be able to work with it. Ideally, you're able to dictate directly into the EMR field, but if this is not possible, there are workarounds that will solve the problem. It's an easily solved training issue that we cover when we get into the EMR portion of the training. The other thing you've got is the data entry versus navigation. Most doctors just click through the structured data portion of the EMR because it's so much faster, and then they do their data entry or their dictation in the history of present illness, the plan, and assessment. And that gives them the leeway to put in everything that they need to put in about this patient. So I don't recommend navigation commands by voice unless a person really wants it, or unless they've got a very serious case of RSI, which doctors do get. The other thing in customization, again, a lot of the EMRs take care of that with pre-formatted text. Again, if you need customization, we can do it, but it's not high on doctors' lists.
So we're talking about, oh, I'm sorry, did I move on too fast there, Barbara?
No, I was just going to say microphones.
Right, so we're talking about speech recognition. We're all on mics or telephones now, and so I'm curious, that's obviously a part of it. Maybe you can tell us about that piece of the technology.
Well, my feeling is there are three things that you really have to make speech recognition work for you. And number one is a powerful computer, which we've discussed. The second is a proper microphone, and the third is product training. Now, as far as the microphones go, speech recognition products generally come with a microphone. It's generally a headset microphone. Many doctors don't like headset microphones because they have to put them on and take them off, and so they end up with handheld microphones, and there are a couple of really super handheld microphones out on the market now. You really should get a microphone that is certified by the manufacturer or by the person that is selling it to you. The reason you want noise-canceling microphones is because if you're in a fairly noisy area, say around a nurse's station, you can get really good recognition without having to step aside. Again, that's something we cover if you have that sort of situation. What you don't want to do is go to your local big box store and pick up a mic that says it will work with speech or voice recognition. If you read the fine print on that, it will often refer to VoIP, which is the voice over IP. These microphones typically don't have any noise canceling characteristics, and that's what you need for high recognition with speech recognition. So I prefer that you call, find out what to buy if you're going to buy it at a big box store, but get that noise canceling in there. Handheld mics are preferred by doctors. The Bluetooth microphone, I've always said you need to be Bluetooth experienced to use a Bluetooth microphone for speech recognition because you need to know about pairing, you need to know whether or not a dongle is needed for the speech recognition part of the Bluetooth mic. It's not for the faint of heart. On the other hand, there are some doctors that get very high accuracy with Bluetooth mics. They're convenient, but I advise waiting until you're more experienced with speech recognition before you invest in a Bluetooth microphone.
Now, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about touch screens. I'm going to introduce Ed to the conversation here. Before we continue, though, I just want to, we've had some people join us late. I want to remind our audience that you can ask questions of our presenters at any time by typing them into the chat area, and we will ask those questions at the end of our presentation. Also, if you're interested in seeing the slides or recorded versions of this event, we'll send those out via email later in the week. So Ed, can you hear me? Are you with us now?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, thank you for joining us. So let's talk a little bit about some of the new trends in touchscreen technology in the healthcare space.
Okay. Well, one of the biggest concerns right now is security with these devices, and you know, Windows 8 has appeared as one of the softwares that are available for tablets, and in addition to iPad and Apple and Android. And one of the things with Windows is that Windows 8 it's fully compatible with Windows security, Windows Server System. So there's a higher level of security that we can apply to these devices. So that's one of the major benefits of having Windows 8 as a platform.
And why? I'm sorry. Why is it higher security?
Well, it's integrated with Windows 8 is able to be integrated with the Windows Server Systems, which, you know, most of the world is using Windows as a back end for their you know, on their servers, and not many people are using Apple servers in the hospitals. So you know, the majority of it is going to be compatible with their systems.
Okay.
Also, using the tablets inside an operating room, that's something that's come about. As you can see from the picture, you're able to actually use the touchpad, you know, just by placing a bag over it, one of those X-ray bags, and it actually does work through the, like, touching it through the bag actually works. So
it doesn't short out the conduction system or anything.
Right. No, you can still use it, you know, inside an operating room. So I mean, you can pull up patient healthcare information, either you know, whatever you want to do with it that you do outside of it, but then you can do it in the operating room as well.
And so the idea then is that you can remove that plastic bag and maintain the sterility of the device even if it's in an active operating room.
Correct. Correct. Right.
All right. Well, let's turn back to Barbara and talk a little bit more about speech recognition, and then we can possibly return to other trends in touchscreen technology in a bit. So you've talked about the training. There's training of the system, but there's training of the person who's using the system. Give us some more detail about what's involved with that, Barbara.
As far as training the individual?
Sure. I think we've talked a little bit about training the system itself, but maybe you can tell us more about the well, you did mention before that it takes less time now to train the software itself.
Right. It's 4 minutes, which is just incredible. And as a matter of fact, for somebody that's experienced as I am, I can get up and running and be accurate with basically no training. All I have to do is calibrate the mic with the system, and I can get up and running immediately, which is great when I need to do that in a face-to-face training situation. I can just jump in and start talking accurately. But really, the 4 minutes is not going to be a great hunk of time for a doctor to spend for the accuracy that it will get.
And just out of curiosity, in the really bad days, how long would this sort of training typically take? I mean, are we talking hours in the old days, or?
What I have found with doctors is that I can, if they give me 2 hours of their time that is uninterrupted, then I can teach them the basics of talking to their computer, because there are some things that they need to know and memorize. I've got an outline. It's called something like 25 of the most important things that you need to know about dictating to your computer. And there are 25 commands that you need to know. One of them is saying period, for example. Very, very simple. And then we go through that and all the permutations thereof of things. If they're not working, this is how you get out of the problem and how you solve it. And what I want the end users to know is, if this happens, then this is how to solve it, so that you're not beholden to me to have to keep calling me up to find out how to do something. And if you have to go into a manual or into a PDF file, the PDF file, I believe, is 258 pages long. So I don't think anybody really wants to go there to find it, especially if I can tell them how to solve the problem, show them how the problem might occur, and get it solved right up front, and that should get them through. So that's 2 hours, and I have them dictate, of course, and we teach you how to correct. And then at another time, we spend an hour with your EHR and testing it to make sure that what you're doing will work well, and we discuss how that's going to be working in that particular EHR. So it's 2 hours of basic Dragon and dictation, and then 1 hour with the EHR, and you should be good to go. I have had only 1 or 2 people in the last year or two that have required more than that time.
So that investment of time then ultimately winds up saving the provider a great deal of time, because they're no longer, in addition to the other benefits you talked about, they don't have to take the time to sit there and type, especially if they're not very good at typing, as many doctors are not.
Oh, it's like night and day. And one of the things as far as learning and implementing the system, some practices will start the doctor with speech recognition a couple of weeks before going live. Others will have them learn the week after the training and going live, and learning how to use speech recognition. It's a lot of learning, but the doctors that will spend the time to do it and are committed to making it work and allowing themselves to learn a new technology without being afraid of it. And one thing that I have, by the way, as a requirement for everybody is to have a sense of humor, because the words will come out strangely sometimes, and just laugh at it, but I teach you how to correct it and keep on going, and it should be an enjoyable experience, not something to dread. And I found a few situations out there where there's been a lot of dread, and I think it's change and it's learning new things, and it can be very overwhelming to the medical community, but we try to make it so that it's not overwhelming, and certainly that there's no dread involved with this.
Well, I can see the potential for humor. It's analogous to the autocorrect foibles that people circulate on the internet, where their phones have made the totally wrong guess about what they meant to say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, what this does by not having to type is it simplifies your workflow, and you can, especially if you are dictating in the room with the patient, you can spend the time with the eye contact and interact with the patient, because that is really what you do best. And speech recognition makes this a peripheral thing where you're getting everything documented without having to concentrate on that keyboard and not looking at the patient. So it's a huge step forward for medical professionals.
That's a trend that I think we're seeing across the EHR universe. So in addition to, I think you've outlined well why speech recognition would be a big help in this arena, but we're also hearing more and more about devices that integrate with the EHR that do some of the vitals work, for instance, automatically. And so there seems to really be interest, especially on the, from providers, in having these technologies that make the EHR easier to use. Whereas, the first step is sort of getting that EHR. Everyone has been in a scramble to get their system set up to meet meaningful use. But now there's really a lot of focus on making those technologies work for the doctor.
Right. And that really is what speech recognition is all about. And that's what the training is, so that it will work for them, not against them.
Well, we sort of are already onto the subject of this slide, so maybe we can just discuss it in a little more depth. There's people are gearing up for stage 2 of meaningful use, and meaningful use isn't just a set of legal requirements; it's also kind of an ideal. So, how can new technologies help folks meet those goals of meaningful use? I mean, we've already discussed the way that it allows for more meaningful patient interaction, but I'm guessing that part of it is if it reduces the amount of resistance from clinicians, that's got to help sort of smooth the path of adopting EHR. Can you maybe share with us some of what you found on that front?
What I'm finding is that the doctors are giving more complete notes. And so in the plan and in the assessment, they are completing everything. Now, if there's the structured data in the EMRs that will take care of a lot of that. A lot of doctors, however, are able to dictate in those fields instead of doing a drop list. And they can put in more information in addition to the structured information to get that all going. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no. Well, that's an interesting take on it that I hadn't really thought about. So part of it is that, and for people who may not be familiar with workflow as much as you are, a lot of the time what people are doing with an EHR is they're sort of using pre-populated patient notes. Is that correct? And you're saying that by using speech recognition, then they're actually taking fuller notes instead of just sort of having the boilerplate standard patient notes.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And while we can customize typically used, say, plans or typically used assessments, they are structured according to the way the doctor speaks, not according to the way the programmer speaks.
Mm-hmm.
So what speech recognition does within the context of the EMR is allows flexibility to have the doctor speak as he normally would speak and get that level of detail he wants in that note. The EHR is set up for meaningful use criteria, meeting that criteria, and within that, speech recognition would be just as if you were typing it. So any place you would type information in an EHR is where you can speak.
That's interesting. So we have plenty of time for questions from our audience. I want to encourage our guests to go ahead and ask questions. The first question we have is for you, Barbara, and it concerns sort of what do you see next. The question is, what's coming on the horizon for speech recognition? So what do you see as sort of the next step in what's going to happen with speech recognition?
Oh, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be so glad.
Well, I mean, I've heard some stuff about mobile devices, and you and I were talking before the session about how you feel that those may not be ready for prime time. Maybe you could address that a little bit.
Well, yeah, and the reason I say that, Brian, is that the mobile device market is incredibly important. iPads are incredibly important. We find that a lot of doctors have Apple products that they would, or laptops that they use at home, and they have to use a Windows-based system in the office because that's the way of the world at the present time.
Mm-hmm.
iPads, iPhones, and BlackBerries and Androids are all out and about. Now, what you're after with speech recognition is accuracy. If you're in an environment where it's quiet, then you can, you should be able to get pretty darn good accuracy. And the iPhone is set up, and I'm sure all the other smartphones are set up so that if you have no connection, it will connect once you get into a Wi-Fi area or GPS where it will go off. There's a certain amount of setup for that, like when you send it, where is it going to go, and who's going to retrieve it? Is somebody on staff going to be retrieving it? Will they be reading it there and looking at it and correcting it there? Or will you go back to the office and do it yourself? So there's a whole panoply of things that need to be done with this. It can be set up as a separate recorder. Now, we've been talking about this for among those of us that are in speech recognition for quite a while, actually. And the consensus right now is on the smartphones is that they are a great secondary device. You're 99 times out of 100, you're going to get higher accuracy if you're dictating directly into your computer and or with a recorder that's a certified recorder, because we're looking at the quality of your voice, not your personal qualities, the quality of that device and whether it will be adding in noise, which will affect the dictation accuracy a lot. So I said to Brian, and I feel that this is true, maybe in about 3 months we might be able to get online and I can give you an up-to-date evaluation of what that experience is. On the Macs, most people are putting in a Windows environment and doing a dual boot so that they've got parallels on and using the current version of speech recognition. So that market is really, really shifting right now, and I think whoever asked the question and what you said, Brian, is absolutely we're going to see mobile as a big, big, big thing in the next few months, very definitely. And I wish I had more information to give you right this second, but I really don't want to get into areas I don't have in-depth experience with.
So people should sort of stay tuned on developments in speech recognition in the mobile realm.
Very definitely is to stay tuned.
Well, this is a related topic, and I don't know whether either of you are necessarily experts in this area, but we'll try to address it. And this might be a question for you, Ed, if you're still with us. The question is, what EMRs have you found to be particularly effective and easy to use on a tablet? So I don't know if you're aware, are there EHRs that stand out in this regard, or is that still a space that people are moving into?
Well, I know one of them that I've dealt with, basically what they do with, if you have an iPad, this is where Windows 8 comes in, where it's better. If you have an iPad, what they have you do is they have you terminal serve into they have you connect into a terminal server which runs Windows. So
for people who don't understand that, basically what you're doing is you're having a remote connection that's sort of, you're no longer really operating on your tablet in a native sense. You're kind of, it's almost like there's an intermediary step that you're going through to get access to the EHR. You're
going into you're going from the iPad to a server that gives you a virtual desktop of a Windows operating system. So then from there you can access your EMR and go through all the steps just like you were at your desktop, like at your PC. Well, Windows 8, you could basically put that EMR system onto that tablet and then run it directly from there instead of having to go through that extra step of connecting to another server and then working from there. It's a lot more direct than you would have to do with iPad or even Android. Would be the same way.
So even with an Android, you would also be using a remote connection like that, not Windows 8.
I believe so. Yeah, Android and iPad, you would do the same exact thing. You would connect through a terminal server. Well, that's how at least the one EMR that I was dealing with. I don't see any EMR companies going out there and creating their whole system so that it can be used with both Apple and Android. It's just that would be too much. I think it would be too much for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
I just see them going with the Windows-based and then using that.
And so Windows 8,
even the one doctor's office.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Even the one doctor's office that we deal with they have completely all Apple workstations. They have to terminal serve. They have to do the same thing with their desktops. They have to terminal serve into the EMR company's servers, and then from there get their virtual desktop. So they have a split. They have two desktops running at the same time. They have their Apple desktop, and then they have their EMR, which is running on a separate window.
So that's a clunky step, obviously, but is it also a security and potentially, an opportunity for technical problems to arise too? Is that part of it?
Yes and no. I mean, most, if you're using a cloud-based system, you're going to run into the same issues. If you can't connect to their systems, it's going to be the same thing. So, it goes both ways. So, it's both. You're going to come across the same issues, whether you're connecting with a terminal server or if you're connecting directly with like if you have a cloud-based EMR. If you have an EMR that's based inside the hospital, like most of them do, like if you're in a hospital, they're more than likely not going to have a cloud-based system. So they'll have a system inside their hospital where they would connect directly. So it wouldn't matter. Being on the internet wouldn't matter at that point.
Okay. Well, this is a related question, and they're really. I'm glad we have an MSP on the webinar here because this is a little technical. And maybe you've already addressed it, but I'll just read you the question. It says, we use remote web workplace through our SBS server. We haven't found that to be able to work with the Apple products. Do you have another suggestion?
Yes, you can. What you would have to do is you would have to again have another server that runs terminal server. The Apple product, Microsoft does make a remote desktop connection just for Apple products. So what you would do is, if you have an Apple product, you would use that desktop connector and connect to the terminal server. There's no way to connect to the remote web workplace. That's only for PCs. So that's what you would have to do. You'd have to buy or purchase another piece of hardware, install Windows Server on it, put terminal server on there, make it a terminal server, and then from there you can connect to it no problem with the Apple devices. I've done that. I've done that before, so I know that it works.
That's an interesting thing, though, for people to consider, though, as they're looking at technologies. If they're, if at the time they're getting an EHR, if they're also looking to upgrade their hardware, it seems that Windows platform would come with a lot less hassles just because of the fact that the EHRs are Windows-based.
Correct. Right. And I don't know. Again, I don't know of any EHRs or EMRs that run on Apple or any other type of systems. I mean,
and the issue is
they
just
might run on Linux. I'm not sure.
The issue is just that the market is so small in terms of hardware installed in a typical practice, I assume.
Right. Yeah, that's another issue. So, okay.
This is a related question as well, Ed, on security. With the proliferation of these mobile devices, what kind of encryption should mobile devices have? Or are there products available that provide that?
I believe the standard encryption that comes with it. I'm not sure on all the acronyms that are in there, but I believe you can encrypt all of the data that's going back and forth, just like email. I mean, they're able to encrypt email from these mobile devices, so it would be the same. It would be the same type of technology you'd use for that, and that's I believe that's part of the that's included with the HIPAA rules and everything else. So, you know, if you use the same type of encryption included with the email, I think you're good. So.
Well, we've definitely got a lot of interest in these server questions. So here's another one for you. It says our EHR HIS runs on Linux, but the end user runs Windows. Does it work with these varying systems?
I am not sure on that one. We don't really do much with Linux systems. I would have to ask. Maybe I can do some research and get back to you on that. But we really don't do anything with Linux based systems. But if you're able to connect with your computer to that Linux based system, there shouldn't be a problem connecting with the touch screen, with the tablets. There would be the same. Windows 8 would be the same as connecting from a desktop. So it's basically one thing that Windows 8 has that's better than. I'm not going to get into the whole Apple. You know, if you like Apple and everything else, that's great. You know,
right.
But when has to do with the actual operating system. With a Windows 8 tablet, it's exactly the same as a desktop. So whether you buy a desktop with Windows 8 or you buy a tablet with Windows 8, it's the same thing. With Apple or an Android doesn't make as far as they don't make any desktops that I know. It's all tablets or phones. It's like a dumbed down version. I hate to say that, but it's like a smaller version of the actual operating system. Even with iPads, you know, and iPads and iPhones, it's not the same as their desktop.
So you're saying like on a phone you got iOS 6 or something, and then if you're using a desktop you're using, you know, Snow Leopard or something.
Right. No, they're both the same. They're both on the same level, but a lot of the functionality is taken out of it. Plus, you know, on the Windows side of it, you have Office that you can use as well. I'm not sure. I don't think you can do that with iPad. I don't believe they have anything even close to Office on the iPad. That's even. Yeah, I don't think they have anything like that.
I know Apple's been working to.
Yeah.
I was just going to say I know Apple's been working to beef up some of their cloud-based services, but my impression is that they still have a ways to go.
Yes, I mean I have an iPad, and I have not seen anything close to any of the Office products on there as far as the functionality goes.
Well, thank you. I want to remind our guests that we are going to send out written answers to their questions. So for those questions that were a little bit tricky to answer, we'll hopefully be able to bring you a little bit of additional information on those questions. So stay tuned and look for those answers in your email. We're nearly out of time, so I just want to thank our guests for joining us today. I think it was an informative session on speech recognition technology and sort of the trends in touchscreen, but especially, obviously, there's a lot of interest in getting the end user products to work with their servers as well. So thank you, Barbara, for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And
I
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
We appreciate having you, and thank you, Edward, for joining us as well.
No problem. Thank you.
So
Thank you for
to
having me.
contact Barbara Mann, our guests can email speech.solutions@verizon.net. You can see the email address there as well. And if you're interested in reaching out to Ed Khamou, you can email him at edward@ssgservices.com. So please feel free to reach out to our presenters today. I'd also like to thank all of our attendees. Remember that all registered attendees will receive an email with links to both recorded and PDF versions of this session, and look out for the written answers to the questions you've asked. ForMed Approved is pleased to announce that the latest addition to our training program provides comprehensive training in meaningful use. The course covers the requirements for both Stage 1 and Stage 2 of meaningful use for both eligible professionals and eligible hospitals on the Medicare and Medicaid incentive programs, along with clinical quality measures, HIPAA considerations, and more. Visit formedapproved.com/education/courses_cmup.html to register for this course. You can learn more about our other training offerings at formedtraining.com. Visit formedapproved.com to learn more about our upcoming learning lunches. The Learning Lunch button on that homepage will take you to our entire slate of upcoming webinars. Our next Learning Lunch will air June 25th and will cover the subject of strategies to educate patients on electronic access of their health information. Keep an eye on your email box on our homepage for other upcoming topics, and thank you again for joining us today.